right.
Hi. Hi, good morning.
Good morning. So also happy to say that, David, we're very honored to have you with the WFA as our Asia Pacific chair for our media group. So I think it's going to be a good conversation. We're just going to jump right into it in terms of brands and brand engagement with the audience. We had a chat about this yesterday, and I loved what you talked about, that the social contract between brands and consumers has changed. Tell us more about that.
I think so, and thanks, Ranji. And I'm coming out of 4 years spent in China, where the change that we went through there was phenomenal. And I said this yesterday, I was working with 24, 25-year-olds who've seen more change in their lifetime than I've seen in mine, and it's a lot more than 24, 25.
Just a bit, just a bit.
So something changed for me when I started to see people sitting around having lunch in an office, watching movies on their mobile phones in groups. I think there's always been this unspoken contract in the West between us as viewers and broadcasters and brands, that we kind of, we as viewers, we tolerate advertising. That's the price that I pay for having free access to TV, and we all go along with it. And somehow, over a period of time, those messages seep in, and I change my behavior, and I buy your brand, and that's fine. And it's welcomed. But that all changed with mobile. This machine that we carry around, I mean, we all know it's far more than a phone, right? In fact, the phone's probably the last thing, the thing that you use least on it. It's a remote control for our lives. We keep it in the most personal places. We store the most personal information on it. I heard stories, there's a standing joke in Shanghai that the taxi drivers there are complaining now about e-wallets because they've made people so attached to their mobile phones that they're not leaving them in the back of cabs anymore. So that second string of income's gone for these guys. So with that comes a very different kind of relationship, and it's very, we've built our business on trying to build brand love.
Yeah.
And interrupting someone on that machine, you can build brand hate very quickly. So it's changed the way completely that we think about how we communicate with the public.
Okay, what does that mean? What does that mean for Unilever when you're thinking about campaigns and when you're going to market?
I think firstly, just recognizing that we can't assume that we're going to be welcome on that device, and therefore maybe what was an acceptable bar for quality and creative assets has just risen dramatically. And we're not the only people thinking this. I know some of the other organizations that will be on the panel later think along similar lines. So getting the assets right is tougher than it ever was. The creative process is tougher, and of course so much less time. I mean, maybe as little as 2 or 3 seconds to convey the core message, and we can't avoid that fact. So I think it's a real a challenge for our agencies, especially. So we've been talking in the last week about this internally, about starting to think in terms of 5, 10, 15 seconds, and the 30 is great, but that's the director's cut. It's almost a luxury in Asia now. Okay,
so you touched on creative, and we'll come back to that in a little while. I want to talk to what you said about everyone on their mobile phones. Yes. When we had this chat, one of the phrases that you mentioned, and it really jumped out and stuck with me, was, everyone's a teenager now.
Yeah, that's because I've got a teenage daughter and I can't get her off the phone. But come on, we're all the same. The way people are using their phones now interrupts everything that we do all day, and so I think it's changed the attention that people have to everything they touch. It's even had an impact now on TV. So even in markets where our TV audiences aren't falling because of digital, the attention span is falling. So again, it's starting to, I think, have an impact not just on how we use digital media, but how we use the traditional media that we're used to working with. So being relevant is far more important than it was 5, 10 years ago. I think we'll touch on this, but it's also, I think for brands now, it's about having a real purpose behind what you do and something more than just a sales message. I'm sure we'll touch on that.
Okay, so, if we talked about the different channels, everyone's a teenager, how can brands stay fresh when maintaining the consistency of an idea? You've got 5 seconds to do it. You've got to do it on mobile phone. It's a personal device. Your social contracts have changed. How can a brand stay true to your brand ideals and your brand, purpose, but still stay fresh and keep consumers engaged?
So I think the example that I was closest to in China, and any of you who've sat on awards juries are going to be sick of the example, with good reason maybe, is Cornetto ice cream, which has this theme running through it globally about tapping into teenage emotion, particularly about love and about first relationships. And in many markets, that's a TV commercial and maybe a piece of content. But what I saw in China over the 4 years there, and the 5th year now, is every year, while that theme was the same, the people who we featured in the commercials were very different and very of the moment. The channels that we put it on were that year's channels for teenagers. And the technology that we featured inside all the content was fresh every year as well.
Okay.
So it's a complete rethink from something where perhaps in the past you might have just changed the sound bed or every few years updated your talent. This was a complete rethink about how we put that to the public every year. But it all came back to having this consistency of purpose and being really, really clear about what the brand stood for, because that trumps all. I think I think we got at least one performance marketer on the panel today.
Yes.
And we'll talk about this more. But in that side of our industry, people have learned a long time ago that a good media buyer, a good media planner can improve something by 10 or 15 points. But it's the assets, it's the message that makes the real difference. And I think that's becoming hugely important.
And you talked earlier about brand love. And you're talking about the asset and that emotional appeal. How does that balance out? How do you strike that balance when going to market and engaging with consumers?
So I think the brand love is everything. What's that piece of... It's amazing. I actually found this on Google, or a search engine of your choice, doesn't have to be Google. And it's a paper that comes from my ultimate boss, Keith Weed at Unilever. He's our chief marketing officer. And it's about making purpose pay. I really recommend it to you guys, because he takes the view quite rightly that we can, we're very big, a lot of you will know, in our emphasis on sustainability and on really trying to put something back in and grow at the same time. But the point he makes is really on point. It's not a competitive advantage if you keep it to yourself. So we can have first mover advantage, but you can't. But if we really want to change the planet and the way that everybody thinks and behaves for the better, then we have to open this up to everybody. So I thought it was a really smart piece of work, which starts to talk about how why we do it, but also how other people can do it. Because there's no point us doing it on our own. No, that's not how you win. So having clear brands with purpose is a big part of what we do. And I'm thinking particularly, a lot of you, especially if you're from the West, will be familiar with Dove and how there's a huge piece around self-esteem that's come out through real beauty campaigns and activities like that. The one you might not know so much about is Bango. Do many people here even know what Bango is? Any Indonesians in the room? It's a loved brand in Indonesia. It's like Marmite in Britain or Milo here. Okay. So it's a cooking condiment. It's basically a soy sauce, but there's a very specific bean we use in it. And what we've done there is to spend a lot of energy in helping the farmers and the agricultural community become much more efficient, and improve their welfare, improve their well-being, improve their wealth. And then we've featured that in all the advertising. As a direct result of being able to talk about that to the public and bring some real love, it's doubled its sales every 3 years for the last 9 years. Okay. So it's a fantastic case where we're starting to learn that doing this actually sells product. It's not just about feeling, having a nice warm fuzzy feeling for ourselves. Okay, no, fantastic. And we go back to the point you made, everyone's a teenager. Yeah. How does that impact audience segmentation and traditional, demographics and targeting, if everyone's a teenager? So I think what we've learned quite quickly in digital, particularly in China, was that everybody wanted to help us target. In other words, they wanted to sell us less at a premium. Okay. Yeah. And when you're an organization like ours, in most of Asia, we'll have 20 to 40 brands active with media budgets behind them. We want to talk to everybody all the time. So very quickly, programmatic and targeting for us became about getting relevant, serving these purposeful messages, but targeting them at different groups. So knowing who we're reaching and adapting the message for those people. So we've been early movers into programmatic as a media buy, but now just really starting to do the same thing with our creative work. So that we can target according to people's contexts, what they're doing, what's happening around them, but also according to what we know about them, in that nanosecond when the message pings backwards and forwards. So a lot more in the area of programmatic creative.
That whole right message, right time, right person.
Yeah. And so everything that's going on with data, and again, I'm sure we'll talk about that, becomes hugely important because we need to have access to the numbers and we need to know how to use them. And I think these days know what not to use because there's so much of the stuff. So the data piece is becoming a really big part of what we do, and trying to figure out how we structure for that is a big decision that's going on at the moment.
Okay. I mean, that's just the perfect segue into our panel conversation, because we've started talking around media. And I think this is a nice time to just get into transformation and transparency and those topics. We've got a great discussion coming on. We should just bring the panel out then, I think.